Massive promotion of degeneracy in most Hollywood films. Massive promotion of degeneracy, which is coming out of most forms of media now. How would Neil compensate for that? Well, he can't, because if you have these kind of unlimited freedoms of expression, you're going to have a moral population, or else you're going to end up with degeneracy.
Thank you very much.
Are they delusional? She's not gonna answer. Come on, answer. Are they delusional? Are they wrong?
I'm so horrified by you.
Can I ask a question? You never dancing in the club with a sexy woman?
No, I don't go to the club with a boner. The answer is right in the chat. What are you talking about?
I'm really proud of you.
But they also listen. I'm not. Shut up. Shut up and let me finish. I'm not done.
You're just making shit up right now, because this is not even the case of academic.
Look it up.
I actually write academic papers. I actually write books and stuff. So
if we remove
No, you haven't. In your personal experience, you've met more strong women than you have men. Really?
Epistemology is the study of the epistles. That's the simplest way to say it.
Get the fuck out, lady. Get out.
You sound like you're deaf.
you get up physically and stalk me.
Hey, that's a get. That's a come up. Wait, we can't hear you, Andrew.
Definition. But this guy told me.
One of the most challenging parts of making this video was actually trying to understand what Christian nationalism is. The thing is, I've never really been able to understand Christian nationalism, and I think one of the reasons why is because I've never heard Christian nationalists strictly define what it meant to support that ideology. It's always seemed super vague to me, and now I think I know why that is. CNAT is so confusing to understand because it has a lot of parts to it. A lot of different definitions and some varying interpretations. See, the first definition I found on CNAT was pretty straightforward. Basically, it's just a political theory where the state should actively enforce Christian moral norms as laws, suppress immoral but voluntary behavior, and reject pluralism as a legitimate social order. So based on that definition, you can understand that there's three main pillars to it. First of all, the rejection of voluntarism. Second, the rejection of pluralism. And third, the idea that state power has moral legitimacy.
You want to ban abortion except in life-saving scenarios? Oh my God, oh no. You want to ban porn? Oh no. You will ban 18-year-old girls from sticking objects up their assholes online for money? Oh no, oh no, oh no. Will you stop these pervy old men from fapping to these girls in their basement by banning the source? Oh no, oh no. While my opponent attempts to vilify my worldview with these things, just note, these are their actual complaints. Not the dystopian things you would think they would try to push, but rather just righting the wrongs of current secular leftist policies. Yes, secular leftist policies. Yes, I'm sorry, under Christian nationalism, the days of mass degeneracy pushed by leftists will unfortunately be over.
And so it seems like CNATs are almost mostly okay with voluntarism, except for a few cases that violate certain parts of Christian ethics. Bodily autonomy can be breached when deemed necessary to stop voluntary yet immoral actions. This includes porn, sex work, gay marriage, feminism, self-harm, and trans ideology, just to name a few. Then there's the idea of pluralism, which CNATs also reject, which is the idea of diverse cultures and moral systems.
It's not that libertarianism and some other view can't produce pluralism. It's that libertarianism, I don't think, can produce anything other than pluralism. And the reason
That's
is
nonsense. My entire opening statement is an example.
Here's why
that is
it can't.
commensurate with libertarianism.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it can't. because
Okay,
you
go ahead.
can get a bunch of libertarians, three gangs of libertarians, and they all seek different things, and they're all and one of them is willing to use force and the threat of coercion.
The state must enforce Christian and cultural moral standards on a population, even if they don't believe in Christianity. Finally, CNATs believe that the state is a moral actor.
If that's the case, when you say, well, Christians are forming this fucking block in order to maintain power before somebody fucking else forms a block and maintains power, then I don't know what you're arguing. Of course we're going to do that. If we don't do that, Connor, then fucking Marxists will do it. Leftists will do it. People like this will do it. And they don't have our best fucking interest in mind, dude. So what choice do we have but to form a block and pass our agenda now when we fucking can do it? What choice?
Power is unavoidable. Force is necessary. Someone must rule. And CNATs would rather it be them than their enemies. And this is why they see enacting Christian legal standards as totally legitimate. And that's kind of what sets this type of CNAT apart from others. It demands legal prohibition of immoral voluntary behavior. This is kind of where it gets a little pedantic, but the thing is I need to be. Because there's a problem in the CNAT circles. I'm unsure if it's because of bad faith or if they actually disagree with each other and they don't even really understand their own positions. So what do I mean by this? After doing some research, I realized what had always made me vaguely unsure what CNAT is. There's a real contradiction in how some CNATs define the theory. Sometimes they speak about how they wish to change the nation culturally. Other times they speak about how liberalism can't address problems. So it kind of seems as if they're saying on one hand that people are overreacting, thinking they're so insane for wanting to enact authoritarian policies. They claim that CNAT is a social force. It's not necessarily about taking over the government. It's mostly cultural. It's more about boycotts and shame. On the other hand, we see many of them explaining why unlimited freedom is a problem. They're implying that we need to get rid of liberties without directly saying it. But there is either voluntarism or involuntarism. There's no middle ground. Take this example of Andrew.
Classical liberalism, he says, good for society because of arts and media and a few things like that. But Neil forgets there's a double-edged sword, that without that foundational ethical system, media has turned into a promotion for mass degeneracy, which hasn't been helpful for anybody. Massive promotion of degeneracy in most Hollywood films, massive promotion of degeneracy, which is coming out of most forms of media now. How would Neil compensate for that? Well, he can't, because if you have these kind of unlimited freedoms of expression, you're going to have a moral population, or else you're going to end up with degeneracy. How are you going to instill those morals in the population with secularism, like Neil's? He can't. Society where freedom to express is important, Christian ethics doesn't say that you can't express yourself. Where's that happening? Nowhere.
He's doing two things at once. First, he's expressing that CNAT is not nearly as radical as people think. They're okay with some expression. They don't believe in total censorship of art, speech, or creativity. But second, he's saying that unlimited freedom of expression leads to degeneracy. Degeneracy must be stopped, and liberalism cannot stop it. This creates a problem that Andrew never resolves. If freedom of expression is the cause of degeneracy, and degeneracy must be stopped, then freedom of expression cannot remain intact. Those two claims can't coexist. And so this leads to one of two conclusions. Either freedoms must be meaningfully limited, or freedom must be subordinated to some higher governing moral authority. Andrew doesn't really state which of these he believes. Instead, he oscillates between downplaying CNAT as non-radical, while also insisting that liberal freedoms are socially destructive. And it's the ambiguity that's the issue. He wants to criticize liberalism for allowing degeneracy, while simultaneously distancing himself from the implication that stopping degeneracy requires non-voluntary constraints. But there is no third option here. Either freedom is sufficient or it isn't. And if liberal neutrality leads to degeneracy and must be corrected, then voluntarism is not enough. And that is the contradiction.
What are progressives going to do about degeneracy in the nation besides fucking nothing?
Well, first, we think we need to at least get a base understanding of degeneracy. Would you just say all homosexuals in general are degenerate?
Yes, they're all sexually immoral. That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
So if you're trying to get, are you just trying to get rid of gays? Are you trying to get rid of?
We would just start with gay marriage.
Okay, so you want to eliminate gay marriage entirely?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Okay.
This just really can't be any more clear. Andrew wants to ban gay marriage. Eliminating gay marriage is a legal act. And yet, in another clip, Andrew criticizes the state for regulating personal life. It's a libertarian position.
You can take the state completely out of marriage. Why does the state need to be involved in marriage?
Because, you know, one person makes a bunch of money, the other person doesn't, and then there's all these laws on what happens when they divorce, all that stuff.
Yeah, so the state needs to come in and govern your personal life, huh?
That's what you're saying.
No, that's what I asked you why the state needs to be involved in marriage. And you said because of money, because one person could make more money than the other person or some nonsense.
Oh, there's like tax benefits, all types of benefits for people getting married. That's just part, obviously.
Yeah, you can literally just reform the tax laws. That takes care of that.
But both these positions can't be true. He claimed the state must eliminate gay marriage, and then he claimed the state should not be involved in marriage. These positions are irreconcilable. If the state is not involved in marriage, it cannot eliminate any type of marriage. By many CNAT's own analysis, social power alone isn't sufficient. There can only be one meaning to this. Legal means are necessary to stop degeneracy. There really is no other option. Sometimes they even outright admit this. Like here when Andrew's debating Connor.
If that's the case, when you say, well, Christians are forming this fucking block in order to maintain power before somebody fucking else forms a block and maintains power, then I don't know what you're arguing. Of course we're going to do that. If we don't do that, Connor, then fucking Marxists will do it. Leftists will do it. People like this will do it. And they don't have our best fucking interest in mind, dude. So what choice do we have but to form a block and pass our agenda now when we fucking can do it? What choice?
This isn't a cultural argument. It's about power. If we don't take it, someone worse will. Andrew's not denying authoritarianism. He's justifying it. And this is kind of how it plays out in the CNAT's mind. All societies are ruled by power. Power cannot be avoided. Someone will impose values. Neutrality is impossible. Therefore, the only question is which values. Christian authority is better than Marxist authority. So, Christians must seize power. Again, I can't believe I have to be this fucking pedantic. But the thing is, I've seen Andrew debate a lot. I've seen how his audience reacts. When they see this video, they'll just call me names and say I'm stupid. That's why I have to be autistically careful and fair with the points I'm making here. Again, I haven't even begun to criticize CNAT. All I'm trying to do is prove what they believe. And that may be one of the more damning parts of CNAT, their ambiguity. The way they campaign so vaguely borders on propaganda. They constantly shout about how bad the status quo is, how degenerate the world has become, how awful things are. But what don't they do? Give us a solution. They refuse to tell us their policies. They want to win hearts and minds through manipulation. That things are bad, that they can make things better. But they won't tell us how, exactly, explicitly. They only say vague things like a more Christian nation or practicing Christian ethics. But those answers are not good enough because no one knows what those terms mean to the speaker.
This debate is about Christian nationalism being better for society than the progressive status quo. To contrast this, the Christ Nationalist Society is a proposition which states that Christian ethics should remain the dominant force in the United States. The emphasis here should be on a strong central family unit based around a man and a woman, and all propaganda should be moved to the state promotion of that family unit. It proposes abortions be outlawed with some small caveats for the mother's life being placed in immediate danger of pregnancy. It proposes that mass migration be stopped and replaced with manageable immigration policies for the purpose of managed integration without putting the cultural burden on an already burdened domestic population. It proposes that Christians in governing positions are generally better than non-Christians and have every right to govern using Christian ethics as their guide and always have. It proposes the elimination of gay marriage, trans ideology, pornography, sex work, and an educational revamp to stop the glorification of such activities in public school systems. It proposes the potential elimination of no-fault divorce or a cooling period before marriage is allowed. and further that marriage itself is the domain of the religious and not secularists or the state.
There is just no room for interpretation here. Andrew is clearly authoritarian. Look at what he's saying. Eliminating legal marriage forms, criminalizing expression, state-directed propaganda, educational indoctrination, governing with a specific moral framework. Authoritarianism does not mean not having elections, having a dictator, having an emperor, having secret police. It means that the state enforces a moral vision and restricts peaceful behavior to maintain social order. And just to finally clarify Andrew's justification, he simply believes that liberalism has failed and that degeneracy is intolerable. Only Christians can or will eliminate it. This is clearly, absolutely Christian authoritarianism. Andrew can't cope his way out of this by saying that he also wants a cultural rejection of degeneracy, because that's not what's in contention. The authoritarian Christian policies are the problem. Okay, now that we understand what CNAT actually wants to achieve, let's try to figure out their actual policies. Eliminating gay marriage.
Okay, yes. So if you're trying to are you just trying to get rid of gays? Are you trying to get rid of?
We would just start with gay marriage.
Okay, so you want to eliminate gay marriage entirely?
Yes, correct, yes.
Okay.
This debate is about Christian nationalism being better for society than the progressive status quo. To contrast this, the Christ Nationalist Society is a proposition which states that Christian ethics should remain the dominant force in the United States. The emphasis here should be on a strong central family unit based around a man and a woman, and all propaganda should be moved to the state promotion of that family unit. It proposes abortions be outlawed with some small caveats for the mother's life being placed in immediate danger of pregnancy. It proposes that mass migration be stopped and replaced with manageable immigration policies for the purpose of managed integration without putting the cultural burden on an already burdened domestic population. It proposes that Christians in governing positions are generally better than non-Christians and have every right to govern using Christian ethics as their guide and always have. It proposes the elimination of gay marriage, trans ideology, pornography, sex work, and an educational revamp to stop the glorification of such activities in public school systems. It proposes the potential elimination of no-fault divorce or a cooling period before marriage is allowed, and further that marriage itself is the domain of the religious and not secularists or the state. From leftist lunatic fascist baiters, the two words are, oh no. You want to legislate there are only two genders? Oh no. You don't want males playing in female sports? Oh no. You don't want to stop mass migration? Oh no. You want to ban abortion except in life-saving scenarios? Oh my God. Oh no. You want to ban porn? Oh no. You will ban 18-year-old girls from sticking objects up their assholes online for money? Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. Will you stop these pervy old men from fapping to these girls in their basement by banning the source? Oh, no. Oh, no. While my opponent attempts to vilify my worldview with these things, just note, these are their actual complaints.
Okay, here's the part of the video where I glaze Christian nationalism. I know, it's crazy. For someone who still disagrees with CNATs, I have to give them credit. Of all the political models, they are absolutely one of the better ones. First, I need to make it clear that my objectives in life are simple: freedom, wealth, and health. That's pretty much it for the tangible factors. And this is why I believe in a pure free market, because it most closely aligns with my goals. What's interesting is that CNAT isn't too far off from that. Yeah, they do have a lot of laws and restrictions for freedom, but you need to compare them to other systems. My goal is consequential, and I believe that CNAT systems outperform many others. In terms of maximizing wealth, health, and freedom, it looks something like this. Anarchism's at the top, obviously. And then there's CNAT. And then we've got classical liberal republics, and then liberal democracies, socialism, and communism. Now, you might be wondering why a seemingly more authoritarian system would rank closer to my ideal as an anarchist. The biggest reason is actually really simple. It's crime.
We are the blade drawn against the endless night.
While we draw breath.
CNAT nation models are heavily anti-crime. This is one of the most pro-economic growth indicators out there. Crime suppresses investment, trading, tourism, population density, and planning. And CNAT ethics and legal systems are strongly against theft, fraud, violence, and just public chaos. Even if the legal system is more restrictive, it strongly deters crime. Low crime environments outperform high crime ones economically. This alone puts CNAT far ahead of liberal democracies, welfare states, socialist systems, and high crime pluralist societies. Christian societies also tend to be high trust societies. They have strong families, low violent crime, norms of honesty, higher interpersonal trust. And trust reduces transaction costs, the need for security, and even the simplest of contracts. The more trusting a society is, the more long-term and investment-oriented they are. The funny thing is that CNATs are actually more market-friendly than they claim or they appear. Yes, they philosophically distrust capitalism, but in practice they tend to support a lot of elements of it, like private property or entrepreneurship, small and medium-sized businesses, most free trade, and they also overtly oppose socialism. Some of them might even be skeptical of centralized banking, but I don't think all of them are, which is just really sad. And then here's the here's the more controversial claim. Cultural homogeneity does have a lot of benefits despite what many people would claim. It definitely stabilizes markets in the short and medium term by providing things that people have in common, like norms, expectations, less cultural conflict, and sometimes intergenerational values. And this allows for long-term planning, even if it limits radical innovation. The thing is that people who share history, who share the same look, who share the same values, are less likely to get in conflict about these types of issues. Sure, there's always going to be conflict on the local level, but it's a different kind of conflict. Anyway, that's a whole nother video discussion. CNAT bans are also not as drastic as people think. Normally it's just porn, prostitution, drugs, and some ideological and sexual expression. And so compared to totalitarian censorship, CNAT is actually pretty tame. Most people can work, travel, trade, live privately, and this is why CNAT ranks so high. It's still not the best system for maximizing wealth, health, and freedom, and that's why I'm not a CNAT, but it's way better than people give it credit for. I don't think CNAT has bad intentions when they want to ban certain behaviors. I'm actually kind of in favor of getting rid of some of the things they want to force away. But they fundamentally misunderstand how human flourishing works. They assume that removing behaviors through force causes virtue, but it won't do that. Removing bad behavior doesn't create discipline, it doesn't create responsibility, and it doesn't create long-term thinking. Taking away the ability to indulge in vices does not make people virtuous. It's true that legal prohibitions reduce a behavior more than free markets do in the short term, but does it solve the problem? I mean, let's just take the war on drugs. It started in 1971. Over $1 trillion was spent. There was more than 50 years of legal enforcement. And what happened? Supply and demand were not reduced that much. Restrictions pushed the activity underground. Criminal networks concentrated. Violence increased. State power expanded. And trust in the people eroded. Now, if we look at how capitalism handles degeneracy, it's way different. The thing is, entry into, let's just say, degenerate activities is voluntary, but it's also costly. Reputation matters. Long-term costs compound. Social sorting occurs. Families, firms, and communities exclude low-trust actors. And that's just a little of an overview. We'll get more into it later, but that's just the general idea. One of the biggest misconceptions of capitalism is that it's identical to liberalism, but they're not the same. When people hear capitalism, they just think, do whatever you want, degeneracy tolerated, no standards, no discipline, no hierarchy, no consequences. But that's not capitalism. That is capitalism plus welfare, regulation, and state power. Pure market anarchism behaves way differently. In fact, capitalism is ruthless. Capitalism allows almost all behaviors at the point of entry, but it is brutal at the point of survival. The first thing you need to understand is that there's no welfare. There's no free handouts. You have to work, and not just work. You have to change. You have to change how you dress. You have to change how you talk. You have to change how you behave. Businesses are far stronger in a capitalist society than a non-capitalist society. They control access to your income, networks, insurance, reputation. They also optimize for profit. And to optimize for profit, they have to conform to the standards of the customers. They have to do what the customer wants. And what do customers like? Punctuality, hygiene, emotional regulation, politeness, reliability, dress standards, speech norms, conflict avoidance. Customers are very, very picky on the subconscious level, and they absolutely will take the best deal they can get. And so the thing is, even if they're not consciously aware of it, they're absolutely judging the businesses they go to. Is this food good enough? Is this employee nice enough? Are these products good? Are all the clothes folded in the clothing section? They internalize these things. This is why businesses are always saying customer first, because the customer has the money. The business wants the fucking money. And how do they get the fucking money? By making the customer buy their shit. And the customer only buys their shit if they like their shit. And so the thing is, in business, you don't get fired for behaving immorally. You get fired for being unprofitable. And so in a lot of ways, this is actually stricter than law is. You have to understand, in a no welfare, Darwinian market system, it's extremely brutal. Laziness leads to unemployability. Antisocial behavior leads to social exclusion. Poor impulse control leads to people not trusting you. Drug abuse leads to unreliable labor. Sexual degeneracy leads to brand liability. And aggressive behavior leads to insurance denial, as do many other things. People have to adapt, because if they don't adapt, they will fail. And it's not because they're getting fined, but it's because reality is going to punish them. They're not going to be rewarded with money because they refuse to conform to the standards which customers demand of their businesses. And who has the money? The businesses. The businesses force the employees to behave in accordance to the values of the customers. You're a fucking retard if you claim that you like to go to a business that treats you like shit, that sells you shit, that is shit. Don't fucking lie to me. You know that businesses have to win you over. The other thing is that capitalism can't eliminate all degeneracy. Yes, there's still going to be porn, drugs, and prostitution. But the thing is, this goes back to what I was saying. Entry is voluntary, but you have to maintain a profit in order to survive. Most people who try to do these activities fail. Income is unequal, reputation is risked, and long-term costs are going to accumulate. Porn correlates with high time preference behavior, and markets punish high time preference. Over time, even efficient degeneracy becomes niche, socially ostracized, and constrained. The CNATs assume that degeneracy exists because of capitalism. And I think one of the reasons for this misconception is because they see the US today and believe that it accurately represents capitalism. But the US is not capitalistic, not in any meaningful way. The thing is, we have central banking, massive welfare, hundreds of thousands of laws, and we've got really high taxes too. The problem with the United States is that we don't allow weakness to fail. We fucking encourage it. And anarchism would absolutely fucking demolish failure. From a CNAT's perspective, is it really worth all the money, time, and labor costs of eliminating a behavior that isn't even affecting one's own lifestyle? Is it really worth the risk of efficiency and even lives? I want to give you an example. Imagine a small town in the late 1800s or early 1900s. Think of it as a remote place, slightly governed, largely left to manage its own affairs. Law exists in name, but enforcement isn't heavy. Social order is maintained mostly through customs. There's a police force if anything does happen, but it's pretty peaceful for the most part. On the outskirts of town lives a man people call Freaky Freddy. Okay, so Freddy is a weirdo, okay? At night, he does loud, bizarre sexual acts with furniture inside his home. Okay, he's not violent. He doesn't approach other people. His house is far enough away where nobody can really hear him unless they wander close to it. And so, over time, the people learn to avoid the area around his house. So basically, there's already social consequences on this guy, okay? He's shunned from, the town center, the marketplace. Shops generally refuse him service. They don't like to let him near them. He's excluded from most public spaces, so they just don't let him come to public spaces. Parents warn children not to go near his property, and they also remove their children if he ever gets close by. So the thing is, Freddy is kind of isolated, he's stigmatized, and he's economically constrained. But still, he does this freaky stuff at night. Now, some townsmen grow increasingly disturbed, not because Freddy is attacking anybody, but because of his existence and his behavior. They fear that the knowledge of Freddy is going to spread, that children might someday hear or learn of him. They're also afraid that tolerating him might signal weakness. And also, most importantly, that degeneracy, if not challenged, is going to grow. Eventually, this group of men decide that enough is enough. They agree Freddy must be stopped. So they plan to confront him. They're going to restrain him and imprison him for his degeneracy. They don't intend to kill him. They just believe in removing him from public society. When they arrive at Freddy's home and attempt to restrain him, they discover something that they didn't account for. Freddy is armed. And in the struggle, one of the men, Gary, is shot and killed. Gary's not radical. He's not a thug. Gary's just a dude. He's just a guy. A husband, a father, a neighbor, a churchgoer, someone whose children play with other children in the town, someone whose absence is going to be felt. The group eventually kills Freddy. The degenerate is gone, but Gary is also gone. So Gary's wife is now a widow. His children are going to grow up without their father, a guider, a provisioner, and the town has lost a productive member of society. So Freddy the Freak is gone forever. That's one problem solved. However, Gary is also gone forever. And so I have a question for the CNATs. Was the removal of Freddy worth the death of Gary? I think that this is a question that CNATs really need to grapple with. When they're enforcing moral order against non-violent degeneracy, they have to accept that enforcers are going to be injured. Some are going to be permanently scarred. Some will die. Some families will be broken by this. Some children will lose parents. And communities will carry the burden of losing their community members. So the real question isn't, is degeneracy bad? Most people agree it's bad. The real question is it acceptable to sacrifice people like Gary so that people like Freddy no longer exist? And further, is this trade still acceptable when repeated hundreds or thousands of times across a nation? Here are the three counter-arguments that I can see CNATs using. Order is worth innocent lives. Gary's life matters, and Gary was innocent. But the preservation of order produces such great results that his death is an acceptable price. Essentially, pure consequentialism. And that's if we even grant that the methodology is correct. This, I think, is one of the more fair arguments. But again, it really just depends on the methodology and if we're actually going to get a better society using these methods. My scenario is false, and this just won't happen at scale. Basically, this is just the idea that everything is going to work out perfectly. The enforcement is righteous, resistance is minimal, degenerates will comply, violence will be rare, and casualties will be negligible. I think this is naive. History shows that authoritarianism is often not successful for long periods at subjugating behavior, like the prohibition of alcohol in the 1920s, or the suppression of religion and free expression with the USSR. I'm not saying that short-term repression isn't effective, like China or North Korea systems. But the outright bans are going to destabilize the population and eventually lead to the toppling and reformation of governments. One of the best examples is current Iran. The state maintained power for decades through repression, but it's failed to achieve universal compliance with many of its mandates, no matter how strict they are. Like the growing number of women foregoing the hijab in public, alcohol consumption, and increased homosexual relations. And that's not even to include the civil unrest that's happening over there right now. Finally, the last response I think will be, God commands it. Basically, the outcomes are irrelevant. All that matters is God's will, and God's will is to rid society of degeneracy. So even if more good people die than bad, it's still the right thing to do. Now, if we go the consequentialist route, and that is my argument, this is why I believe capitalism is more efficient. Freddy is a weirdo. Nobody disputes that. What's in dispute is what we're going to do with Freddy. CNATs want to remove him from society even at their own risk, even at the risk of their own people, or much more likely, the usage of their people's hard-earned resources. But in capitalism, there is no loss. This is because social consequences exist. Businesses exclude him. People avoid him. Children are guided away from him. No one dies. And this is what I think CNATs would refuse to answer. But if you extend their beliefs, they would have to agree that if a few men like Gary must die to save society from moral collapse, that is a tragic but necessary cost. I'm not even saying that what they're doing is wrong or bad, but I don't want to live in a society where the lives of the valuable are traded with the lives of the degenerate. And that is the distinction right there. Capitalism allows the competent, the hardworking, the intelligent to rise. It keeps them safe. Christian nationalism allows their own Christians, their righteous enforcement arm, to risk injury or even death. Not because they don't have a choice, but because they see the enforcement of their moral law as a higher priority than their own people's lives. I don't even believe that this would be a 1-for-1. If we scale the actual policies and their effects, even if we're generous, I would still say it's not worth the loss of societal contributing men. Let's just take a random number, say like 10,000 non-violent degenerates need to be imprisoned, suppressed, or removed. I think it would be fair to say that at least 100 enforcers are injured, permanently maimed, a few possibly even killed. Even if it's just 100, this still destabilizes dozens of families. I'll even take it to the most extreme degree. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think that from a CNAT standpoint, they would even say 10,000 degenerates removed at the cost of 5 to 10 lives is a net win. And I would disagree with that sentiment. I would say that those 5 to 10 Christians are societally net positive lives. These are members of your community. They're people you grow with on Sundays. They're the fathers who play catch with your kids. They're the people who teach Sunday school. Again, you could say I'm making an emotional appeal, but I'm just considering the well-being of the community, how they're going to be affected. For me personally, it just comes down to selfish reasons. I wouldn't sacrifice the people I care about for something I find gross. It's not because I don't care about degeneracy, it's because I care more about the lives that are valuable to me. The last point I want to go over is economics. I'm not sure how much CNATs disagree or agree in their own circles about economics, but from what I've heard, it sounds pretty illiterate in understanding these systems. From their own words, it seems like they hold at least 3 economic beliefs. And I want to clarify that this is just some of the CNATs I found online. Free markets don't make societies rich.
As far as some of the other points, these are just kind of basic liberal points, Connor. You have the largest economy on the planet. That's true. But that's because it's a very resource-rich nation, which was only recently colonized in the last few hundred years. And it's a completely landlocked across the ocean. And so our enemies have no access to us. And in North America, we did fight some wars between us and South American nations. But again, we're highly resource rich. So that's the main reason that we're the largest economy on the planet, honestly. It's not because of any liberal fucking ideology. I would contend that if you had who took this whole place over and had access to all the resources, that would still probably be the largest economy on the planet.
Basically, it sounds like Andrew's arguing that the US economy is large because of its geography, natural resources, and its isolation. He implies that any regime, including those guys, would be wealthy under similar conditions. It sounds like what he's saying is capitalism is not the causal factor in its prosperity. Markets cannot regulate behavior.
What's the antidote to degeneracy besides more degeneracy from your view? Give me one. Just give me one antidote for any degeneracy in society. One. Just one from your view.
I feel like I disagree with the idea that just those things are degenerate in the first place.
You have nothing. So prostitution, not degenerate, right?
I mean, it might be, but it doesn't matter.
Is it or isn't it?
Sure, you could say it's degeneracy.
Okay, what are you going to do about it? What has the secular mind gotten in order to take care of prostitution, bro?
Andrew repeatedly rejects liberty as an answer. The claim is that markets are incapable of shaping behaviors without top-down moral authority. Do CNATs even like capitalism?
You want to legislate there are only 2 genders? Oh no! You don't want males playing in female sports? Oh no! You want to ban porn? Oh no!
Andrew mocks the idea that banning porn is dystopian and explicitly endorses bans.
What did tech companies do for 20 years? All they do is they go, well, I don't like what you're saying. Gone. You're blacklisted. Nobody can hear your speech. Nobody can hear what you're saying. Nobody can see. You can't even bank, right? So they use a form of like non-force to just deperson you, right? What I'm saying is that instead of allowing them to deperson you, right, we can use the same type of social structures to basically deperson them.
He praises debanking, deplatforming, and economic exclusion as legitimate tools. This just isn't a free market position. It's coercion. So in this last portion, I'm not even going to try defending the anti-degeneracy of capitalism. Because even if capitalism allows degeneracy, a society that is richer, healthier, freer is still consequentially superior to CNAT. Even granting all of their moral concerns, capitalism still produces better outcomes for human well-being. Simply put, capitalism is far superior to CNAT when it comes to physical health, monetary wealth, and non-aggressive liberty. This is because human behavior adapts to incentive structures. People pursue perceived self-interest. Self-interest includes comfort, safety, status, family, and future security. People adapt to avoid costs and secure benefits. Systems that reward peaceful cooperation reduce violence. Systems that subsidize non-production increase non-production. Systems that tolerate crime increase crime. Systems that make violence expensive reduce violence. These are just real observable patterns. I mean, think about any easy example of incentives and see what happens. Take, let's say, 2 Walmarts, okay? One Walmart has heavy security. The other Walmart has no security. Do you think that there's going to be a difference in the shoplifting rates for the 2 Walmarts? Or do you think the fucking criminals are going to be afraid of the guards carrying Uzis on them? This just ignores basic human psychology. Incentives are real. The thing is, capitalism produces more wealth because it changes the nature of people by targeting their incentives. Power is decentralized. When power is decentralized, people have to negotiate. People want to avoid pain and increase comfort. And mutual destruction often contradicts these goals. This is how social contracts form. A social contract is an unspoken agreement to avoid behaviors that cause conflict, because conflict is expensive. This is why most people don't cut in line. Not because they're moral people, but because they don't want to get into conflict. Conflict is inconvenient. If we scale this logic, we understand why people, most of the time, avoid theft, assault, murder. They know that the repercussions are going to induce pain and reduce their comfort. This is where innovation comes in. Intelligent people become wealthy in capitalism because they innovate ways to reduce pain, increase comfort, and increase convenience. I mean, just look historically at things that have made people extremely wealthy. Low-cost insurance, grocery pickup, home delivery, online services. Business leaders succeed because they satisfy this preference in others, and in doing so, they satisfy it for themselves. They delay gratification for long-term profit. Ironically, even after making this whole video, I still think that CNATs are better allies to anarchists than either side wants to admit. I have to admire a lot of CNAT traits. They have strong families. They have an intolerance to crimes. Most people in CNAT culture are honest and they're courteous and they have a sense of duty and they're just really good, genuine people. These are things that high trust societies are built on. And that's one of my core values, to have a high trust society. It's funny because CNATs intuitively hold a lot of capitalist values. They just restrict those that they believe violate some sort of divine commands about God not tolerating degeneracy. And I don't blame them for wanting to serve God. I just think that the actions that they're taking is not going to be the best for their own people. I actually hope that CNATs keep winning. I hope that they gain more cultural influence. I hope that there's a revival of Christianity. I hope that there's a celebration of Christian heritage. I hope that they do more public festivals and more public parades. I hope that we start heading towards more modest and humble norms that Christians hold. I hope that they have more open religious expression. Now, a lot of this is biased, but at the same time, this is my opinion. I remember when I was younger, growing up around Christian communities. And the thing is, a lot of these people are just so happy. The way they smile, the way they laugh, the parties that they have, the way that they gather, the way that they celebrate. At these Christian events, children run around playing with each other. Adults visit with each other very loudly and boisterously. There's just a lot of joy in the air. Now, personally, I never cared for these events, but those people absolutely did. And I would never want to take that away from them. It seems just 20 years ago, Christians were way more open in public, and I don't see that anymore. I don't see open air gatherings. I don't see public expressions of faith. I don't see confidence in their Christian identity. It feels like fear and silence have replaced that joy. And I think widespread defamation of Christianity has played a huge role in this. And that is a tragedy, because Christians are people too. In fact, they're some of the best people. They're one of the most peaceful religions. They're one of the most peaceful people. They're one of the most accepting people. And in a nation that's heavily Christian, it is a damn shame that they can't even express that joy in public anymore. There are still parts of Christian culture that I find annoying, such as like nagging, passive aggression, people that really don't understand the faith. They kind of, sing the songs and they raise their hands and they go to church on Sundays, but they don't really understand Christianity. And the repetition, the frickin' repetition of every Christian service. It's like there's nothing new under the sun. They don't teach you anything new on Sunday services or even in Bible study. But most Christians I know are kind, caring, forgiving, and accepting people. And that is intrinsic to their faith. I want Christians to feel safe practicing publicly again. But I don't think that top-down enforcement brings that back. I believe that it requires a cultural revolution. And I think that capitalism is how we get there.